So I play a little game with YouTube to where I try to time out so my stream starts exactly at the point I want it to. And I think I nailed it this time. Hi, I'm the Expert Layman, and this is Grinding Meaning number 22. Status Junkies and Casual Rating Guilds. This will be sort of a companion stream to the last couple streams I did on the Holy DPS spec, but I got to keep your worlds apart. This is a Grinding Meaning stream. I'm going to be talking about meaning and psychology here. And things got toxic. But in such interesting ways. I feel like I'm ahead. And I'm really glad that I decided to be vulnerable and like try to join what was purporting itself to be a casual rating guild. But I should have known better, but you know, it's better to be naive than cynical. I know that sounds weird, but naive means you can still have new experiences and see things in, you know, different ways. When you're cynical, you're just like, I'm tired of being, I don't know, you just don't have the strength to deal with it anymore, and you just become cynical about everything. So joining a guild it's very much like starting a new relationship. And there are a lot of things in relationships where we tend to only notice the bad manifestations and don't realize that that's just like the sideways version of something that might actually be healthy. On this is Shadow Moon Valley in the background here. I thought I'd put up something pretty. Not too many people can display it in this way because of the 16:3 aspect ratio. You should be naive, a little naive going into a relationship. You should look at them with rose-colored glasses. Like, although I think maybe I've been watching Seinfeld too much lately, which brilliant stuff. It's been 10 years since I watched this, and really, really smart. Just an incredible grasp on human psychology and just human nature. And even though it's so unbelievably silly, the characters do things that just make so much sense for the characters. Obviously, when they're being sillier, they need to make a story move. They'll have them do things that are a little bit weird, maybe not quite with their character, but so often they just capture things so well. But in the relationship, it's almost better, you don't want to be cynical and be like looking for things that might be wrong. It's much better to give them the benefit of the doubt, rose-colored glasses, and just kind of go with it, even things that like might be like yellow or red flags. And I think my last stream was about yellow and red flags in groups. Just even if it seems kind of silly, it's helpful to kind of just assume the best of intentions until you can't. And then much like in a relationship, the stuff that, you'll beat yourself up at the end of a relationship, be like, oh my God, all those warning signs were there. There was this. They always did this. I don't know why. And you start beating yourself up. But it's like, there was a healthy point of overlooking your partner's flaws that you would need to do in a successful relationship. But we tend to lean into whatever we're already doing. So yeah, there's a point where you should have done something a long time ago, but not like all the way back to the beginning. And it gets fuzzy. So what I'm building towards is a particular dungeon run where it was basically very early on, and it was clear that, the suspicions that I'd been, basically suppressing because I wanted to try to make this thing work, were totally justified. And I actually got really lucky that it's just so overt that there's no ambiguity, and like, I don't have to feel bad about it. And the really good thing is that the guild leader was in on it there, and there's no ambiguity there either. So a lot of times people do stupid crap, but then, like, oh, people, whatever. But like when like the freaking guild leader's in on it, it's like, oh, okay, cool. I can just dismiss the whole thing then. It's just so much simpler. The thing about people playing WoW Classic, in my first grinding meeting, which is ugly, please don't watch it. Let me do an audio check here. I gotta make sure I'm being heard. Okay, well, that isn't playing for some reason. Give me just a second. Okay, and that was perfect timing too, because I'd forgotten what I was talking about. So in my first grinding meeting, I had this idea that the reason why people wanted to keep coming back to WoW Classic was, and I still think that's partially true, it's just not as big a piece as, I don't know, I kind of naively wanted it to be, is that, I don't know, I call it struggle added value, like working really hard for a long period of time and just dealing with a whole bunch of crap to get somewhere or get a thing, just add so much value to that thing. And, it's basically struggle, the struggle we went through, which is unique to WoW Classic and is not in games today, made it real in a way that it's kind of, that current games can't. Okay. Had some message pop up and immediately disappear. Thanks, YouTube. Just trolling me. What was the point? Obviously, nostalgia. People want to go back. But, why they want to go back. And it's kind of like, we're going to go back to the relationship thing here. A lot of people just carry so much baggage into their new relationships because they didn't, own their shit from the last relationship. And in fact, they're in the new relationship. A lot of people look at it this way, men and women, where it's like, I'm going to win this time. I screwed up last time. I've had plenty of time in the shower to think about all those arguments and all the things. And you know what? I'm not going to make the same mistakes. And it's like, you've already made it. You're bringing the problems of your past relationship into the new relationship. And a lot of let's say the best and brightest in original vanilla WoW, they're onto other things. They probably, I would imagine, compared against the general population, that they came back at a much, much, much lower rate than the lesser skilled players. Which I suppose you'd assume anyway, but I think it's more sharp than you would think. At any rate, it's a lot of people trying to recreate what never actually happened, but they felt they were entitled to. That's the one thing I noticed as soon as I started playing. Everybody's claiming all kinds of experience without knowing the things a person with that experience would know. And the number of people doing that was just incredible. So I think there's a whole lot of this time they're gonna get to that raid that they couldn't get into before, and they're gonna have their own guild, or they're gonna be a top tier raider, and it's also about hazing, because if you're not good enough to be someplace, and the people that are there are good enough to be there, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to have a pretty bad experience. And that experience is, to that person, is indistinguishable from being treated like crap by assholes. If you don't understand why you don't belong there, then I think a lot of people had that experience. And they thought that the problem was the assholes in their way. But the asshole that was in the way was themselves. They either didn't have the social skills or they didn't have the play skills. And this is actually the thing that, when I broke the seal, as you call it, as far as, okay, I'm going to take off the rose-colored glasses and go through all the things that kind of poked at me, but I, didn't figure it was healthy to dwell on, because I like being in the moment. And as soon as you start thinking about the possible malevolent motives of other people, you're in a different headspace, and at least I can't just enjoy things in the same way. I'm not sure if I'm going to go through the actual, I should, because that's the part people want to hear. Okay, if I'm going to do it right, I'll put it at the end. I'll just be like the grocery store. You want the eggs, the milk, the bread, all the way in the back. The last stream I did, which was not a grinding meeting stream, it was just I did mention, I started a few times mentioning things that happened in the raid that were kind of curious, but then I'm like, that's not what the stream is about. I think I did mention the Judgment of Light was weird. I guess I should just give a brief assessment of what I think okay. I'm a big fan of philosophy of science, and there's kind of like three sort of base axioms that you work from. It's don't assume you're in a particularly special place, don't assume you're in a particularly special time, and don't assume that you are anything special. And that's what I'm going to, for the most part, work within here. I believe that this guild, and in itself isn't unique. I think that there are many of them. That's full of people that don't really understand the game. They're just imitating the people that do. And actually, I have a graphic for this. This is a little something I made up to kind of describe how people are different. And I've been told normal people is an offensive term now. I should fix that. You look at me, I'm just a bit over into the dark blue. Or darker blue, not the dark blue. And I can perform in the yellow area, but it's draining as hell. But another way to look at this is you have like concept people and you have recipe people. And concept people will work from these abstract, almost sometimes physical models inside their head of how systems and things within those systems and the systems interact with other systems. And it's kind of like riding a bike understanding. There's no way to verbally articulate to someone what they would need to know to do that. There's another component to it that can't be verbalized. And the recipe people, and this is something I really noticed, spending many years, just basically training a couple hundred different people to do the same relatively simple stacking job for printing, and just seeing the different ways people learn. Because when you're dealing with people, you tend to assume people are like you. So what I'm trying to do is share the concept of what it is you need to understand to do the thing. But I found out that many, maybe even half the people, you just need to give them the recipe. You do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. You need like a flow chart, and which you would do anyway. But some people, that's all they have. And when those people try to operate machinery, like complex machinery, like printing magazine quality stuff, if you can't build abstract models of physical systems in your head and then manipulate those models almost in like a tactile way as you're thinking about how like the tension system works with the web guides and how that affects the stretch of the paper. And, you have to understand how these different systems interact in a way that you couldn't possibly verbalize. You almost have to do it in like an autistic savant kind of way to be able to do the job. And the funny thing is, once you're a head pressman, if you got there, like you had this other language you communicate with other people with, where like if you're like new there and you're watching these two people talk, it's like it feels like you're hearing every third or fourth word of a conversation, but they seem to be hearing all of them because they're working within this shared model. But then there's other people where especially like one thing you noticed is like is working ahead, because concept people will work ahead to the point of diminished returns, to where they understand that this isn't actually making it any better, and it's actually I'm kind of getting in my own way and creating more work than there would be otherwise. But recipe people never make that thing. They think, well, if a little is good, more is better. And even more is better than that. And maybe that's a bad example. But with the... I'm going to close this. What I noticed with the rating is that nobody there seemed to understand why they were doing any of the things that they were doing. Like, maybe I was just really lucky and was with some really... really smart and articulate people who like did their homework, but they would explain like, okay, here you have to do this, and this is why you have to do this, and this is why this works this way, and and like get into the nuts and bolts of like why it is you're doing what you're doing, because people will remember better if they understand why. If you just say do this, and do this, it depends on the person. Like I said, recipe people, that's fine for, but like abstract model people, not so great. Especially, the thing that really surprised me is that no one there understood the Perigib mechanic on like is the last boss of Melchizar, and it's on all mobs actually, but like somebody is like, yeah, I don't think you're supposed to attack from the front, and I'm just sitting there silent, like, as I'm silent most of the raid. I'm not saying stuff. I'm not getting in there trying to make things about me. I communicate when I have to, and when there's breaks, and when I think I might have something that people might enjoy hearing. But I'm just sitting there like, okay, somebody's going to explain this, right? Somebody's going to explain this. And so I had to explain, the whole like swing timer on the parry thing. But nobody there understood that, and like none of the other fights either. And I realized, and once I broke the seal, I realized, oh, these people are much less skilled than the people I was with in vanilla. They just basically, I don't know about all of them, but like I'm saying generally, based on my experience, they watch videos and imitate, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like a low resolution understanding of what's going on. And since it's so much easier now than it was then, you just couldn't tolerate the same kind of, like, basically they can gear their way to offset their incompetence. And incompetence isn't the right word, but like, not quite, if they had to do these raids, like originally it wouldn't work so well. And I thought this was a casual guild, because the exact thing I said when I hit, once I got my Karzan key and a heroic key for Coilfang, I just put into looking for group. I was like, looking for a casual guild that does Karzan. This was not that. And again, once you break the seal and look back on it, it's like, it's probably not a particularly elite guild if they are recruiting randos from looking for group. So the Dictator's Handbook is a great book, and I really recommend anybody. Like you so much more of politics, especially like foreign politics, makes so much more sense after that book. And also like little fiefdoms, like, guilds. Like you have this idea that the dictator is like this all powerful, super powerful guy that rules with an iron hand. And it's like, yeah, but he'll have an inner circle of people that aren't necessarily his friends, and he has to keep these people happy if he's going to keep his thing. So it's this constant game of like keeping the people that are propping you up happy enough that they don't stop propping you up. And I don't see any reason why that would be any different in a WoW Classic casual raiding guild. Oh, pardon me. Basically, the status junkie part is there were some nice people in that first run, in like the first couple runs I did with the guild, and then they got a little bit less nice. But there were still like, one or two silly people. But like the weird thing is like people, the guild leader has a separate Discord. So he's got 2 Discords open all the time, and he's constantly communicating things behind the scenes. So like people are moving in and out of the raid, and people are going like and doing things, and you don't know why, because he's not like communicating what's going on. And there's a lot of weird like bragging about recruiting people from other guilds, and then a lot of bitching about trying to get into runs with these high-end raiding guilds, and like getting like, get out of here, kid, you bother me type. That was the reaction I picked up on. Like just an angry little kid mad that his older brother wouldn't let him go with him. And that should have been a bad sign, but I was still in, like optimistic, forgiving mode. I'm not going to fault myself for looking past things, because that's like I said, I think that's the healthiest way to try to go have new experiences a lot of times, unless you're in a situation. If it's a situation where you're not in any kind of physical danger, like, this, be vulnerable. So I think what he does to keep his inner circle, basically they're status junkies. And the distinction I'll make between what you might call a junkie and what you might call an enthusiast is discernment. An enthusiast wants the best type of experience, whereas a junkie will get what they don't care where they get it or how they get it or what it is, as long as it gets the job done. When you don't actually have the skills to compete at a higher level, but you want to pretend that you are, you tend to gather people at your similar level, and then you all kind of pretend. But you can't just... The circle jerk gets boring after a while, and you need... basically to feed people to your lieutenants. There was... This is so weird to say this, but like I did a partial Tarzan run, a few bosses. Some were left over. We didn't have really the group makeup to do a couple other bosses, but I was in like much worse gear than this last run of Tarzan. But there was a nice kind of like buff loadout, so I was doing fair damage. But then it was really weird, like, to get into a raid and have absolutely nothing that increases your damage or provides you mana. like seriously, nothing buffed my damage and nothing gave me mana. And I can't help but wonder now, okay, I think I really pissed off the guild leader. And I think I pissed him off because he's like, oh yeah, I love my priest. And it's like, oh cool, let's talk priest. And then it became clear he didn't understand what I was doing with my priest, which, I'll forgive people for, but like, he apparently got really insecure about it. And I think that last Tarzan was kind of tailored to try to humiliate the holy priest who thinks he can do DPS. Because I get the sense he's been talking mad trash about me in that other channel. And when I go in and actually perform well, it's upsetting. So this last one seemed designed to just suppress my ability to do damage, and I still rocked it. And I think that really, really upset. it really triggered. It was very triggering, let's say. And so I was on my warrior, which I'd brought in the guild, and he was 68, and I was just looking to get some more Coilfang rep. I was kind of bored of questing. And then, like, after I asked in guild, it was like 370s are like, I want to go. The guild leader was one of them, but he wanted to go on a shaman, which was lower, appropriate range. And it's like, it's funny, I'm so glad I said this in guild at one point, is that it's always sketchy when you see a 70 going into a lower dungeon, a non-70 dungeon. Because there's no XP, there's no gear, and there's no rep. Like, the three things that you go into a dungeon for. And it's like, well, they're going in for a reason. Well, what is that reason? Well, typically, it's this kind of toxic, childish behavior of wanting to be a big fish in a small pond. And it's basically the same thing that the same behavior that, people who constantly sandbag or throw in Rocket League to suppress their rank so they can be better than the people around them. But since everybody's doing it, it creates this like super toxic environment of people like competing to pretend to be worse than they are. But to come in, and the idea was that they were gonna come in and make my life hell, and it didn't quite work out the way they planned. Because one nice thing is when what they didn't know, and I didn't feel any reason to tell them, is that I've leveled every class through Outland. I've raided on most of them. I've run 5-mans with all of them and all the Outland dungeons. And I know pretty much every class backwards and forwards. So I know the different kinds of bullshit different classes can pull in different contexts. And I have my raid frames up. I can see what people are targeting. I can see that I marked the skull. And then I see like 3 people click on the skull, and then one moves over to the X, and then another one sees that, and they basically spread out among the targets. And I literally laughingly called them out for that. Like, because I stayed like happy just over the top, happy, silly, having fun, even while they're being as toxic as they possibly, because the idea was that they were going to make me rage out. But they were basically, in that, do an older stream, it was like something about toxic vampires. And I do an analogy where, they just try to descend and feed on you because they're starving, and it doesn't work. And then they get really, really, really upset and confused because it wasn't working. And I was actually, without being directly confrontational, because it's kind of this trick I picked up from like somebody I knew who was, it's like bitterness and resentment and that kind of crap. It just wasn't a gear in his transmission. And just seeing how people reacted to how he just wouldn't go certain places. And part of the staying naive thing is that they can't pull you into those places. So even though, I did know what was going on and everything, I'm just like, I'll just stay in this mode. And then I learned that they knew even less about like their own classes and how threat works. And he's like, oh, sorry about, blasting him with that starfire as you're running out there. I'm like, no, it's actually not that bad because of the way threat works and taunt. If you blast him and then I taunt him and then I shield slam him, I get all of your threat plus mine. I may not be that far ahead of you, but we're miles ahead of everybody else. So you kind of help me out. He's like, I don't think it works like that. I'm like, no, it definitely works like that. And this is a guy who tanks. How do you not know this stuff? Because that's like one of the greatest tricks in the book. Just wait for somebody to wallop it and then taunt them, and you get all their threat plus whatever you hit them with right afterwards. Because I was originally like, hey, you guys are going to hit like trucks, so I'm just going to mark a skull, and then you guys can go ahead and just murder that. I don't think it's going to live very long. And then they realized that this was going to get in the way of harassing me, basically hazing. Like, because when you're a status junkie and you can't actually do the things that would grant you status in a merit-based system, like a meritocracy, a competence hierarchy, when you can't actually compete in that, but you want to feel like you're not a loser, you try to find someone else to force into that role. And then when that goes poorly, oh, you're having a bad day. And they had a real bad day. And at the end of the run, just like ninja'd the tank legs off me. Uh-oh. And even then, the last thing I said was, hey, that's okay. I wasn't tanking. I didn't want those legs. No, worry about it. Like, because there's a point where you not getting upset will enrage them more than anything aggressive you could say. Oh, I just logged in. How's my AFK flag up? So yeah, they try, and the guild leader was healing, and he was doing that little game of where they try to keep you as low on health as possible at all times without actually letting you die. Because at first I thought it was things going sideways, and then I'm watching this man in his casting, and I'm like, oh, I'm not flowing any more cooldowns, and I'm not using damage mitigation. I'm just going to use everything I have for threat, and if he lets me die, then he lets me die. And the funny thing is, once you take that strategy, they realize it, like through this kind of like unconscious communication, and then he stopped doing it. I mean, he did it for a while, but then later when he realized it wasn't upsetting me, he went back to healing normally. Like, it's such a bitch move, And they were all doing bitch moves. And, I'd run into like somebody who was like really freaking elitist, douchey kind of like, And that's the other thing. Like, this was supposed to let me know my place. Because we're in there, and I see a note. I'm like, hey, any other minors? And somebody said, yeah. I'm like, well, I just want to get a point off this. You can have the rest. So I hit it for 1 point. And then he's like, yeah, can you trade those to me? You know, I'm a jewel crafter for the guild. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to keep the stuff I just mined. You can have the rest. And he didn't even mine it, which makes me wonder, well, clearly it wasn't about what I'd picked up, but he might not have even been a miner. He might have just been lying and trying to see if he could get me to give him something that was clearly mine. You know, I'm also a blacksmith. I need that ore. You know, I didn't say that, but it's just like, no, I think I'll be keeping, you know, the stuff that I mined. And then I just moved on, you know. Because like around every corner was just trying to poke me in such a way or try to get me to say something that they could like twist and then like, it was like, what's an analogy of something that's just about to burst, but just not quite happening? Like it's just on the edge, but okay, that's maybe not that analogy. This is YouTube. But it was actually really interesting, and I'm glad I tried, and I don't think I have any reason to think that the other casual raiding guilds are going to be really any different. It's kind of like, I've known a couple people who, when they were a teenager, they were sort of in a band, and then like in their 30s or 40s, now they're like putting the band together. We're going to do it, you know, and it's just this kind of like little delusional affair where they're basically LARPing. And, you know, if they're having fun or whatever, I don't tell them, but like when they start trying to pretend that they are the thing they're pretending to be, so yeah, basically a loser guild, pretending to be more. And it's not, I wish I had one individual interaction with like one person there that like I thought was really cool. I think there are people just kind of like keeping their heads down, and that's what it is too, is, hey, you know, you bring them into Karzan and you get them some gear, and then they're like super excited about the gear, and it's basically like there's another book called The Wrong Way Home by Dylan Desslinger. I cannot remember the name, but it basically has like criteria of a cult, and one of the things you do is like you bring them in and like you love bomb them, and you hit them with like, you know, like affirmations, and you know, you make them feel like they're a part of this, you know, important thing, and then, you know, and that's just intoxicating. But then as soon as they run afoul of like one of the group's rules, you make it clear that like all that can go away. And I think it's a similar kind of investment strategy of where you join the guild and they really bring you in and get you, which is basically, you know, crap Karzan gear, you know, compared to like, you know, higher end rating. But to somebody who's trying to relive the glory days beyond what they actually did, this is a big moment and they need this. So then when you take them into a dungeon and you start treating them like crap, like you can break a person into just being incredibly submissive. And I think that's what I saw a lot of around the guild too, is people that are just like, I'm just going to keep my head down, I'm going to try to get my gear, you know, and this just all very sad. Because I just have the reason it didn't work on me is I don't have that motivation set. I'm here, well, because I kind of need to like do stuff neurotically, and I like to feel like I'm progressing in something, and I you know, I need a game to stream. And I want to try new things. I want to learn stuff, you know. I do like the nostalgia, but you know, that doesn't hold me for all that long. Like making the priest holy thing work is just the coolest thing ever. And I was so supposed to fail. And I think that's why I was particularly enraging to the guild leader, because I think he talks shit about me. He's an idiot, doesn't know what he's doing. And then I go and do it. And now he's really mad because not only did I do it, he doesn't understand how I'm doing it, which is like doubly injurious. But I don't know. They can go play their toxic games and try to pretend they're not losers. But I'm just going to go around and have fun. And that was the weird thing, because before I joined, I was like, the reason I was optimistic is because, like, when I was running, like, some 70 dungeons, and even before 70, I noticed, like, the quality of the people is a lot better. Like, leveling up, like, it seems like there's, like, these bridge trolls everywhere that are just, like, they know people want to run these dungeons so bad, so then they just... The harder it is to get into a dungeon, the more likely people are going to be to exploit your need or your want. But since there's a large population running 70 dungeons right now, and reputation matters to some degree, the vast majority of runs, people were really cool, which was the opposite. Like, literally the worst run I've had since entering Outland was with the guild. It's like every little thing. And I normally would, if this was just a pug, I would have just bailed. But, and maybe this was me getting drawn into toxicity, but I kind of wanted them to suffer in their attempt to make me suffer. I think that's justified. Plus, I didn't want to just, because I hadn't broken the seal yet. So, like, my decision was, hey, I'm just going to get through this run, and then I'll do some reassessing. And that helps keep me in the proper mindset in the moment. So I'm solo again, but... hold on. But I got some nice gear out of it. Oh my god, I went to check the badge vendor. Not one piece of badge gear supports my build. Unbelievable. And I might have said a trinket, but like... like, only one piece of gear at the vendor has Spirit on it, and it's an epic headpiece that's only slightly better than this one. And it's not part of a set. So, like... So why am I running heroics? Well, it was a great experience. It was fun to do a full clear of cars on. Oh, and the other thing, I basically think that the group composition was designed to suppress me, because when I did Holy in vanilla, that was the biggest. Like, if I didn't have, like, damage buffs from the raid, and I wasn't getting mana from either Shaman Totems or Blessing of Kings or Judgment of Wisdom, whatever. Like, if I wasn't getting mana and I wasn't getting any, like, crit or damage buffs, like, that old build, like, you'd run out of mana so fast and you'd just kind of, like, be done. But that's not true in this case. With this isn't that build. This is different. And even with what appeared, even if it was just accidental, it still took on the form of the group that would offer me the lowest damage output based on makeup. And like I said, it may have been a coincidence. Probably wasn't. I seem to be just circling around now. But don't stay in a guild if they're parasitizing you. You know what? I don't have it. I don't want to give advice, because I'm a weirdo, and the advice would be for other weirdos like me, but there aren't that many, so it seems kind of silly to give advice that targets so few. Well, it was a great experience. I am the expert layman. I hope you all have a great... Oh no, I'm supposed to do the thing at the end. Oh yeah, this has been Grinding Meeting 22, Status Junkies and Casual Raiding Guilds. The Psychology of Toxicity. I am the expert layman. You all have a great day.